I'm Nicole Shanahan, Bobby Kennedy's running mate. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public.
That is what I want to share with the world is, hey, I'm doing this. You can do this too.
And you're offering a decentralized small business model that can be replicated across the United States as well.
People are suffering, and I'm offering them healthier alternatives.
Because it turns out a lot of these products disrupt the endocrine system.
Some of these ingredients are mimicking estrogen. They're affecting our hormones.
Is this how you imagined your life would have gone when you were a teenager?
People think you need land to homestead. You don't need land to homestead. You can start in your kitchen.
Wall Street Journal is a massive national publication. For you to be singled out by them about sunscreen is pretty unusual. Gubba, it's so nice to be here with you today. I've been really looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
I wanted to tell you a story. The first time I've ever seen one of your reels was in a text message chain that Bobby Kennedy was in, and one of his good friends sent your video where you talk about, well, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Of course, I, have my own power source, and I know how to grow my own food, and I know how to access well water. And it was my first time being introduced to you and your work and how you homestead. And it was really inspiring. What brought you to sharing your life with the world?
So, what brought me to sharing my life with the world is really a few years ago, everybody experienced the pandemic and how crazy it was. And I remember going to the grocery store and seeing the empty shelves and the empty fridges and freezers and people fighting over bags of beans. It was seriously chaos. And so I really took a dive into homesteading and learning how to be self-sufficient and care for animals and find this joy, but not only joy, but this peace of knowing that I have a food storage and I know how to care for myself. So that is what I want to share with the world is, hey, I'm doing this. You can do this too, and it brings you peace so you don't have to be fighting over beans at the grocery store.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I think a lot of us, for the first time in our lives, understood how fragile our food supply system has become. And I think a lot of people have learned as well how empowering it is to grow your own food.
Yeah, it's extremely empowering. And like you said, the food system is so fragile. And we watched it break on such a large scale in 2020. But whenever there's those natural disasters, we're watching them fail and people are rushing to the store to get water and they're waiting in these lines. So at the end of the day, I'm just encouraging people, hey, you don't have to do that. You can set up a system for yourself where you're at, wherever.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool to see how comprehensive your homestead is. Tell me more about it. How did you grow up? Were you always homesteading? My understanding is your journey has had an interesting arc. You had parents and grandparents, so historically your family had homesteaded, and you had spent time though living in a city at one point.
Yeah, so my great grandparents on both sides, they had homesteaded, they had cattle ranches, sheep operations, but during that time between my great grandparents and me, all of that information was lost. The grocery stores came in, convenience set in. So my grandparents, lost those roots and everything they had learned growing up on the homestead that got passed down to my parents. I grew up at the grocery store. I had never really been to a farm. And I didn't know much about it. And so what really spurred me was just seeing the supply chain break. And I'm like, wow, my great grandparents, they relied on themselves. They grew their own food. I want to do that. Being reliant on a system that is not reliable is not a good idea. So I did live in a city, and that's where I started homesteading in my kitchen. And people think you need land to homestead. You don't need land to homestead. You can start in your kitchen with learning how to do sourdough, learning how to can. And that is something I do is I make courses and I have ebooks on my gubbahomestead.com where I teach people how to do these things wherever they're at.
I've learned a few tips as well from your Instagram page. Have you been surprised at the reception you've received? People are really excited by what you're doing.
Yeah, I feel excited. So when other people are excited and they are telling me things that they are wanting to learn and they are learning from me and that they are opening up their world for different perspectives, it makes me so excited. Like I am happy to be connecting with
Mhm.
people. At the end of the day, that's what I want to do. I want to share these things that are bringing me joy and peace with the world.
And at a time in which so many people have, especially my age, we always had convenience foods, lots of processed foods. And if you're a millennial, you pretty much have spent your entire life now exposed to highly processed foods. And my generation is suffering from all kinds of cancers, fertility challenges, autoimmune disorders. And, our healthcare system will kind of point to some lifestyle items, but they'll just be as quick to prescribe pharmaceutical medication. What are kind of the things that you've seen in the overlap between living a homestead existence and metabolic health?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is skincare.
Mm.
So when all it comes down to with the skincare is the ingredients. You just have to look, what are you putting on your skin? Your largest detox organ of your body, and what are you putting on it? And what that takes me back to is I had a personal family member, my dad, who was struggling with eczema so bad. It was so severe. He was self conscious of going out.
Mm.
He went to the doctor. What did the doctor do? Prescribed
Steroid
him
cream.
topical steroid cream.
Yeah.
And he sent me those creams, and I went and I was looking and I was learning about the topical steroid withdrawals and how it can create a situation that was worse than the original problem, the original ailment. And I said, absolutely not. We're not going to do this. Let me make you some tallow. So, tallow, ancestral wisdom, what our ancestors were using. They weren't using all this chemical, pharmaceutical goop on their skin. So, I made them some tallow, my dad, and it healed him within a week.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's what led me, that right there led me to creating my Arvati skincare line, which is offering these healthy alternatives for people who are seeking solutions like my dad was. People are suffering
Mhm.
from these skin ailments and other pharmaceutical problems, and I am offering them healthier alternatives.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned women's cosmetics. It's come up now in some of my research. I fund women's reproductive health research. And one of the recommendations now OBs are starting to make to women who are struggling to conceive is that they should reduce certain use of products, from shampoos to different dyes to skincare products, because it turns out a lot of these products disrupt the endocrine system, which can have an impact on functioning of the reproductive system in women. And it's been very interesting to see the evolution in the science happening. And, I know you've recently been embroiled in controversy around sunscreen, which is really interesting because you're not the first person that I've seen called out by the media because they've taken on sunscreen. It seems that sunscreen is the thing that gets a lot of online influencers into trouble. You can talk about, vaccines used to be another one that would get you in trouble, but now that's kind of out there. People are more freely able to talk about vaccines now, but so few people have actually taken on sunscreen. Andrew Huberman took on sunscreen, and it was interesting to see he was then pointed out by many people in the scientific field as representing scientific facts incorrectly. And then they went after his personal life. I don't know if there was a correlation there, but it seems that sunscreen is a really big trigger.
Yeah, it absolutely is. When I post, I originally started sharing, hey, sunscreen might not be what we think it is. And that upsets people. But then I came and was sharing that research, kind of like what you were talking about with the fertility. And over 70% of the sunscreen ingredients listed on the FDA website are causing adverse health reactions. All it takes, again, it goes back to the ingredients. And I looked at the back of the sunscreen bottle and I'm like, I wonder what this is. And you start diving and you find that some of these ingredients are mimicking estrogen. They're affecting our hormones. And then you think, wow, there's so many fertility problems. There are people in my personal circle who struggle with fertility, and you can't help but wonder, what are they bombarding their system with? But they don't know because the system tells you to wear sunscreen. You've got to wear sunscreen or you're going to get cancer. But when you dive into the research and you're looking at these individual chemicals, you start to see a different picture.
And the sun has actually several beneficial health um, impacts. For instance, we know that sunrise light helps with our circadian rhythm, that the more exposure we get to sunrise light, the more vitamin D we produce. And vitamin D is a hormone. It's not actually a vitamin, it turns out. It was labeled as a vitamin, but it's actually a hormone that gets produced when our skin has direct sunlight on it. And melatonin. There was a recent paper that said melatonin gets produced during the daytime. And we think about melatonin as something we take as a supplement before bed to help us fall asleep. But the reality is that melatonin is produced due to direct exposure to sunlight. So it strikes me that sun has all of these benefits, but we've been told our entire life that sun is the enemy.
Yeah, I think that is a narrative. It appears to me, again, I'm no expert. I'm just looking at what's presented to me and making my own decision and then sharing things that I find interesting or the scientific research. But if you look back in the 1960s and the 50s and 70s, people were healthy. You have the videos of people at the beach before, the onset of sunscreen. They're working out. It didn't appear as if there's as many health ailments then. And then all of a sudden, the sunshine and the sun became dangerous and scary. And you have to wear sunscreen or you're going to get cancer. So now you look at society now and it doesn't seem like it's helping. Again, I'm no expert, but that's my take on it.
Well, I'm really inspired by you because, people are wanting to be able to trust their intuition. And all of us are born with an innate intuition. We're part of nature. We interact with nature in so many different ways. It strikes me that what you're helping people do for themselves is to trust their instinct a little bit more and get down to the basics of common sense and to feel empowered to read a scientific paper, to feel empowered to do your own research. You keep saying I'm no expert, but in some ways, citizen journalists, they're not necessarily getting paid to do journalism, but they're uncovering some very important truths. And we're at a time in history in which people have listened and complied, especially during the pandemic. They listened and complied with the experts. And it's now being shown that some of these experts weren't actually working off of scientific evidence every time. So how would you define this individual exercise of going out there and trying to find answers for yourself? How would you encourage people to trust their ability to get answers?
First, I encourage people just ask questions. When it comes to food, like when you're in the store and you're picking up a bag of bread or a loaf, just turn it over, read the ingredients, and start wondering. And then be like, hey, this word that I can't pronounce seems a little funky. The label also said it's made with bioengineered ingredients. What are these things? And then just go and look. And so I am encouraging just ask questions about everything. And when it comes to the intuition of what I do, at the end of the day, I'm here just sharing my life of what brings me joy and encouraging people to be their best selves, however they want to come about that. But ask questions along the way. It doesn't hurt, and you never know what you're going to find.
Are you surprised that your life has taken this course in the sense of you're working with your hands every single day? And is this how you imagined your life would have gone when you were a teenager? What did you think you were like? What were your goals when you were a teenager, and how dramatically did they change?
Oh, complete polar opposites. I wanted to go into the medical field. I even went to pharmacy school for a little bit and I was like, whoa, what is going on? I don't want to be a part of this, and dropped out. And then found my way into homesteading. And you're right, I do work with my hands every day. I was out outside with my animals. I'm milking my goats. I'm tending to my garden. I never thought my life would go like this, but 2020 was such a huge, huge wake up call to me that I am not only doing this for myself, but I'm doing it for my children, and I'm doing it for my great grandchildren and my
Mhm.
grandchildren. So my posterity that is coming down the line, I'm trying to be future thinking and be self sufficient along the way.
Everything you're saying is so deeply rooted in common sense, this dignity of the individual, the dignity of truth, finding truth, and then the reward. It sounds like you feel like your life has become incredibly rewarding by being able to take a stand for something that you believe to be right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like at the end of the day, people should be doing that. They should be standing for what they feel is right, but also not allowing that to cause contention. And when I
Mm.
say that, I feel like the news causes a lot of contention, causes a lot of divide. And at the end of the day, I'm here for my community and I love my neighbor, whether they think different than me, we can find common ground. So, yes, absolutely.
That's a beautiful sentiment. And you've been incredibly non-political about it. Like you've done it from this really gracious standpoint of, you have bits of humor in there, but you own a lot of these mislabeled narratives. You own them, like the word conspiracy theorist, and then you turn it into, well, I'm literally just doing these common sense items that allow me to have an abundant life, which is a framing that I personally believe is very healthy. I think that in a time and age where so much money, and I sit in Silicon Valley, so much money goes into artificial manipulation of biology. So little money goes into appreciating the science of soil microbes, for which you've probably know so much about, having seen your soil transform on your homestead over time and through seasons and through different crop rotations. I've just wanted to point that out, that I think how you were doing what you're doing is so inspiring, because of the fact that you're not pointing to things that are going sideways and calling them out and trying to attack them. Instead, you seem to be putting all of your energy into these incredible solutions, that can bring people out of illness, that can bring people out of this sense of helplessness. Where do you get your spiritual guidance in focusing on the positive? Because I think people want to get there, but there's all of these, bits of hesitation. There's fear. There's lack of faith in oneself to be able to grow food. I can tell you, I personally still find it hard to take a seed and make it into food. It's this whole process that I'm oftentimes overwhelmed by. But there's got to be something that has motivated you spiritually, that has helped you be so strong throughout this process of you know bringing up a homestead after really so many of us in this generation have lost that connection.
Yeah, so when I think about that and what's coming to mind, what I stand on spiritually, this is at the end of the day, everything comes back to is my belief in Jesus Christ. I have a very strong belief in a creator who I have faith in. And so when you have these whirlwinds of the world and the news and everything's going chaotic, I have my rock who I believe in, who encourages me to be my best self and encourages me to love my neighbor, regardless of how they live their life, what they think. And that's what keeps me strong. That's what motivates me because I know through him, I can do anything. I can go and grow the garden. I can go and learn.
Mhm.
Like him, he learned precept upon precept. So I am learning step by step on my homestead. And that is what I share with the world. You can do this. I know everybody has that in them. They can learn step by step to grow the garden. Even if it's not a big, expansive garden, you can start with an herb garden on your kitchen windowsill. You can get some small growing pots going on your outside doorstep. You can do these things. I know, like we were talking about that innate self, you have it in you, and that's what I want to share.
That's so beautiful. I hope that in listening to this, people feel confident in starting their own at home homesteading operation or I don't even know what to call it, homesteading experience. Do you have any concerns about being able to do what you're doing without continuing scrutiny? I mean, it must have been so shocking to see the Wall Street Journal come out and signal you out for your stance on sunscreen. Um, it must have felt frustrating. I mean, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it must have been pretty surreal to see that come out, to probably have reporters poking around your claims and what you're putting out there on social media. I mean, you've got 1.2 million followers on Instagram, 25,000 on YouTube. On X, you've got 50,000 followers. Wall Street Journal is a massive national publication. For you to be singled out by them about sunscreen is pretty unusual.
Yeah, and I knew that they were concocting something up because they had reached out and said, "Hey, we are going to be running an article on your video about sunscreen. Can you let us know why you don't wear it?" And that was pretty much it. And so I wrote up a big write up and had, I believe it was 17 references to scientific sources of why I don't and why I believe that, or not believe, know that there are harmful effects coming out of these sunscreen ingredients. And I had a notion, I figured they weren't going to include this, and they didn't. They just included opinions from professionals instead of actual scientific research. Because when you present the whole picture to the public of this scientific research of everything that's out there, that becomes a problem.
Many people who are going to listen to this and hear your story are going to have their spidey sense alerted, because why would journalists, in a time when there's this risk of going into World War III, where our current standing president can't seem to make it upstairs regularly. Our former president is a recently convicted felon. Why in the world would the Wall Street Journal reach out to you and ask you why you don't wear sunscreen. Doesn't that seem it's one thing if it's like your local paper or a beauty magazine or Elle, but the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, I think that is because this curtain, this narrative is being pulled and people are starting to see, wait, I've been told to put on this chemical junk that is filled with these mystery ingredients that, lead to potential pregnancy risks, are leading to DNA damage. I've been told to put that on, and then people will start seeking other alternatives. I make a tallow-based sun balm that is a mineral sun balm that is the healthiest alternative to these chemicals. And so when people start seeking that, that puts a hole in the pocket of big pharma. And what's so interesting is I got flagged for, or I got fact checked for my response to the Wall Street Journal. I had my scientific findings right in front of me. I had all my papers. I was reading them. I was sharing them, and they fact checked me. And so I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I'm presenting scientific research, and they fact checked it. So I went and checked out their fact check and what research they had. Well, it come to find out in some of the research they were using to back up their fact check, those scientists were in cahoots with Johnson& Johnson. So you can figure out where scientists have gotten funding, who they've previously been representatives for. And I did that on one of these articles. The scientist had been a representative for Johnson & Johnson and other pharmaceutical companies. So I found that really peculiar. Okay, it kind of just all goes back to the money. Again, I'm no expert, but that's how I am taking these things.
Yeah. You're not an expert in the sense that, you know, you haven't been hired by a large pharmaceutical company to put out research, but you are an expert in as much that you pose a threat to the prevailing narrative. And I think that's what's going on is there's this perception that you are an expert in certain things that seem to be working. And your expertise comes from lived experience. It comes from knowledge of working with the land. And it comes from your own personal investigation. And I think the thing that makes you very powerful is that you're an authentic person and you're a real person. And the fact that somebody out there is talking about their lived experience in a way that's connecting to other people directly, not through marketing channels, not through, these massive campaign launches for these $1 billion products. You're connecting with people through what you believe to be good and true. And it's not necessarily going to make you millions of dollars. There's the thing about tallow is that it's a real resource. It's not something that can be made in a lab necessarily. Really, really good tallow comes from the fat of cattle, and the quality of the tallow is fully dependent on how well the cattle is being raised. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct on their diet and grazing. And I only focus on grass fed. So, yes, I'm so happy.
I wear tallow.
I'm going to have to send you some of my Arvati.
I would love that. I've been buying my tallow from this woman in Kauai, but I haven't actually found anyone that ships yet because the consistency, because sometimes it can, get very bubbly if it's anyways, but I would love to hear about more about how you think about the source of the tallow. I'd love to learn more about it. I don't actually know that much. And so I'm eager to learn from you.
Yeah, so tallow, what's so neat about when you are supporting small, business owners like me, you're not only supporting me, but you are supporting these local farmers. I go and I get my grass-fed tallow from local farmers, so it is building up a community here. And I think communities are so powerful, but With tallow, it's filled with these natural vitamins. So you have the vitamin A, D, E,
Wow.
and K. Yes. And they all serve a different purpose for your skin. They're not synthetic. Like you said, they're not made in a lab. So it is building up your skin barrier. And the fats in tallow are so similar to the sebum that is produced on our face. So people are worried, like, hey, I have oily skin. Is tallow going to make me more oily because it's a fat? No, it's actually going to work with your skin to help regulate that sebum production. And what's so neat is that our ancestors knew this. They had this ancestral wisdom of using tallow from their cattle that they were raising, and they were using oils, and they weren't using synthetic lab made processed stuff that sits on the shelf for never ending periods of time, and you turn over the label and there's all these ingredients, and they didn't do that. They were using what they were raising. They were using what was within their community. And so it's really a tie back to our ancestral roots. And
Mhm.
it is what another thing is, I think, big pharma could be coming for me. Like you're saying, why the Wall Street Journal is singling me out of all of this, because I am offering these healthy alternative skincare options in a time where do you even find that? You go to the stores and it's just a bunch of lab made junk, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So that does dent the pocket, and it pulls that curtain back like, hey, are these products that you're buying at the store affecting your fertility? Are they causing other health issues? People don't want that. They want something that is real and authentic. And that's what I am offering with my skincare, the Arvati Tallow Skincare.
Yeah. And you're offering a decentralized small business model that can be replicated across the United States as well. Because what my understanding is that the tallow, the fat that comes out of beef production, it's not easily processed, so it doesn't compost. So having it go into a new economy is really valuable for small and middle and family owned businesses in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm about. Like your podcast, Back to the People, bringing
Mm.
that power back to the people and being able to use items like that and make a better product for people who have needs, who are suffering from eczema or psoriasis or other things that this could potentially help them with. So I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I do too. I want to make sure that people doing the good work that you're doing, you said a word, you just said a phrase. I'm worried that big pharma is coming after me. That is a horrible thing to feel. Especially given the good that you are doing in the world and for people. We're in a country that has been, it turns into such a kleptocracy that it has influenced individual liberties in such significant ways that someone making tallow sun balm feels worried that a massive group of corporate interests are trying to shut them down. You're a small and medium sized business and a homesteader. This is madness. It is madness to me that this is happening to you. Um, I think advocacy, I think more and more people hearing about this and being outraged by it is going to move the needle. I think people need to understand that they can take this outrage and go out and vote. I mean, there's really good members of Congress out there. We should make sure all of our representatives are protecting small and mid-sized businesses that are selling good and clean products that are making people healthier. At the executive level, we have to make sure that individuals like you are protected. And it should be obvious that you should be protected for producing an organic tallow-based sun balm. I mean, the fact that I'm even having to say this, marks the absurdity of this moment. What have the sources of support been for you? Have you had lawyers reach out to you and say, I want to help defend you? Have you sought legal action? I mean, I just want to tell you personally, you've got me here. I want to go out and fight for you. Um, no large industry should be coming coming after small and mid-sized farmers in this country. Farming is the backbone of this country, and homesteading is one of the greatest gifts. Um, it's a God-given gift. It's a God-given right to be able to tend to your own land, with and especially without government involvement. Um, what are kind of the things that you're seeing right now that indicate optimism, that you feel like these are organizations that have your back, or these are the people that have my back? Do you feel supported right now, or what would you like to see more of?
I would like what you're saying to see more support on a larger scale because no, like you were saying, the Wall Street Journal singled me out with everything else going on in the world. I mean, there's so much chaos going on in the world. Why do I, when I'm sharing about sunscreen, matter? And to know on that, TikTok also deplatformed me.
Wow.
Yeah, they deplatformed me. They completely took me out because I was talking about sunscreen. So I don't feel like I am very protected because they can just try and silence me. They're fact checking me on other platforms, even though I am sharing the truth and I'm just encouraging people to ask questions. Again, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like I am just sharing what brings me joy. I want people to be happy, however that is. So where I find my support is through the people who are, looking at it like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, she is just encouraging me to ask questions, and that does make sense. She's just telling the truth. What is going on? So that's where I am finding my support right now is individual people from corporations and anywhere else, social media platforms. No.
Right. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about the social media. So social media and corporations have really tried to silence you. You have, First Amendment freedoms, and that's this absolute freedom to speak, to share. And when the majority of people right now get their information and are communicating online, um, it must feel to some degree that there's been a coordinated effort to restrict your First Amendment freedoms.
Yeah, it absolutely feels like that. I feel like I don't really have the First Amendment. It might be an illusion. I don't quite know who's pulling the strings at the end of the day. So, yes, I am being silenced. And I don't have, at the end of the day, that First Amendment right, really.
Well, I want to make the offer that I think it would be really interesting to see you get some legal support. Um, and, maybe we can talk offline to figure out what that looks like. But I've heard so many stories now of small farmers and homes and some homesteaders having their lives and livelihoods impacted by the government. Raw milk has been under constant attack. And, if these attacks are also being met with restrictions on speech online, this seems like a bigger issue where there needs to be a coming together where we can all mount a defense against the government and against these influences and unraveling what these influences are. I just want to call that out for you in this moment that, I don't think you're alone. I think that there's this greater trend happening right now. And there is also a group of people who are now noticing the degree of the authoritarian influence in Americans' lives. Um, there's absolutely been an encroachment on our constitutional liberties. And the fact that, and I'm just going to say, you have experienced such petty attacks from these organizations across the board for, again, actions that are common sense, healthy, and helpful, and people love. So keep doing what you're doing, Gubba. I am 100% behind you. I am a huge fan of yours. I cannot wait to use your tallow.
I'm so excited. Yeah, thank you.
I could talk on forever about this because I'm really, really passionate about what your story represents. And I really, really want people to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and that's my point too, is I want people to understand what's going on. And like you said, the farmers, they are the backbone of this country. And I follow a lot of farmers and homesteaders online. And so I see how the government is encroaching on what they are doing. So I don't do commercial agriculture here. I do allow my community to use my farmland for different purposes, but I see farmers who are offering raw milk direct to consumer or other products. I also support local farmers. And I see how the government is trying to come in and take away direct consumer to farmer market. Like they want to control that. They want to knock out the farmer, control the food. So I do find that concerning, and I really do hope that people can see that. They can see that our food is so important. Where our food is coming from is so crucial, and to really rally together and support our farmers. Like, what is going on with our farmland? What is going on with the laws that are being passed to hurt our farmers? And when I am online and I am sharing, that is one of the messages I share is support local. So
Mhm.
try to find your local farmer. When I first started supporting local, I had to drive about an hour and a half to, get the produce, get milk, get other things. And it was worth it. It was so worth it. And so I try to share that message because when you are going and spending your money at the grocery store, it's just going off to the corporations. Again, the corporations who are all in cahoots with each other. But when you go and you spend your money at a local farm, you are supporting your local community and you're putting your money back into your community. And that strengthens your community, and power is in around you and the people.
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and chatting with me. I'm a huge fan. I know I keep saying that, but of all of the people that I see in the lineup today, and actually this just generally on my podcast, I was really, really excited to have this conversation with you. You are like a massive example of what can happen when you believe in yourself and you self empower your action into your own home, into your own food source, into your own well being and care. And you start to look around nature and put it all together in this mosaic that really supports your own health and in addition to your own health, your own freedoms.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really inspirational. And I admire that you are trying to bring a voice to the people because that's so important. Like you were saying, I feel like our voice is being stripped away. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Of course. Yeah, and I hope we have a chance to meet in person one day.
Yeah, come out to the homestead.
Really?
Yes, come on out. That would be awesome.
What state are you in?
I am in Washington.
Oh, you're in Washington. Okay. Yeah, I went to University of Puget Sound.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I love it up there. I'm sure we'll be up there in no time, and I would love to learn a few tips from you. And actually, I find the mixing of tallow to be so fascinating because I have now bought maybe 6 different brands of tallow and they're all different consistencies. And some seem to be able to like cover up the gaminess with these really nice essential oils and flowers and natural scents. And then others seem to kind of be stuck in, I'll put it on, I'll be like, I think I smell more like a cow today.
Oh, yeah. Mine is not like that at all. I have completely got it down. I have a certain process that, is proprietary, but I really want to send you some, or you can just come out and I can make you some.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that next. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.